Hello, today we are 28th of April 2025, and we have two guests to discuss the issues in the Middle East and Turkey and Syria, Azerbaijan. And our distinguished guests are Mahammad Mammadov. He's a research fellow at Topchubashov Center in Baku, Azerbaijan, and Ilkan Dalkuc, political commentator at Daktilo 1984. He's based in Izmir, Turkey. And so, guys, thank you very much for having time for this discussion and for accepting this invitation.
Yeah.
And I have actually the first question that we'll talk about Syria and Turkey. And this question will go directly to Ilkan. And then, Mahammad, if you want, obviously, you'll be able to add your thoughts as well on this. So, as we know, a few months ago, when Bashar al-Assad was toppled, we know that Turkey played an important role in it. And I'd like to ask you, Ilkan, actually, how has Turkey expanded its military and political influence in northern Syria following the toppling of Bashar al-Assad?
Actually, Turkey has a strong relationship between al-Shara's organization HTS before the toppling of Bashar al-Assad, because we all know that the Syrian opposition used to be located at Idlib, which was a stronghold of the opposition after the Russian involvement in the Syrian conflict. The Syrian opposition just cornered at the Idlib, and they regained their strength, and they resolved their power, and in the end, to me, as a result of some of the economical challenges and as a result of the international as a result of a shift in the international balance, Syrian regime is toppled by HTS and mainly El Shara. I mean, Turkish influence is, as expected, is getting stronger in the northern side of Syria, and we all know that there is a significant challenge to this influence, which is now the Israel. We all know that the Israel has a serious issue about its security, and Israel has a serious concern about its security, and Israel has a long-term concern about potential Turkish maybe threat, maybe challenge to its own security concerns. I'm pretty sure that we have been witnessing in Syrian arena. There is a cold war, like a crisis between Turkey and Israel. But in the end, the two countries which gained space after the toppling of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and after the loss of the diminishing of Iranian influence in Syria, are the two countries, Turkey and Israel, and both of these countries are getting some ground in some level on the Syrian arena. And we all know that there are some issues between these two countries. In the end, I I happen to believe that these two countries will resolve their issues, because their issues are uh, not to be. I mean, both of uh, both of those countries would like to postpone their issues between each other, because they have they have greater interests in other arenas. They have the greater concerns on other arenas. For Israel, it's basically the influence of Iran and the Iranian regime. Actually, for Turkey, its greater concern is the encirclement of the Kurdish influence in Syria, so that these two countries will somehow resolve their issues. And in the end, Syria needs a support from Turkey and an understanding and recognition from Israel to be a stable state in international arena. As we all know that there are still sanctions are imposed against Syrian regime, so that in order to be recognized from the Western world, al-Shara needs to be settled down with Israel. And in order to establish a stable regime and stable economy, Syria also needs to be establish a strong connection with Turkey. And also we all know that before that, al-Shara's regime is ideologically close to Turkish government, Erdogan's government. And in the end, we will see a compromise between Israel and Turkey in the Syrian arena. And we will get that point. I don't know about the borders. I don't know about how deep will be Turkish influence. I don't know about how strong will the Turkish influence, but there will be a Turkish influence, and there will be a respect for Israel's security concerns. I don't know about which line will be determined as a final resolution, but I know that there will be a line of there will be there will be some terms of understanding. I mean, Israel certainly don't want that doesn't want some of Turkish military assets in the southern sides of Syria. But also, we all know that Israel, even once or not, Israel, there will be some Turkish influence in Syria, so that we will see an upcoming understanding between two countries in the end.
Okay. And actually, just a quick follow-up question to you again. How has, since you've mentioned Iran, for instance, how has Turkey's influence in Syria affected its relations with other regional players, for example, Iran and the Gulf states?
I mean, Turkish influence in Syria after the toppling of Bashar al-Assad, in according to Gulf states, with regards to Gulf states, we are witnessing some new opportunities and new areas to get together. I mean, Turkey has a difficult and different relationship in Saudi Arabia, because we all know that Turkish government has a close relationship between Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan. And Iran has serious problems with Saudi regime and also United Arab Emirates. These two countries have serious problems with Iran. But in the end, they do consider Iran. They do consider Iran as a threat also, and they want to be a stable Syria, and they want to have some world in Syria, so that there is an area of there is an area of collaboration in Syria between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, between United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Turkey in the Syrian ground, so that the toppling of Bashar al-Assad actually make room for Turkey to move towards diplomatically to the Gulf states. Iran is another case. Actually, Iran is we all see that. The statements from Iranian regime and Iranian government-led newslets, pro-government newslets, I mean, are very hostile to the Turkish government and Turkish state, and they are not really taken well about their defeat in Syria. So that they try to undermine the Turkish influence, and we are witnessing some unfriendly comments from that, but they are not actually taken really seriously from Turkey. Turkey wants to unheard, wants to unsee these comments, and do not really wants to engage Iran directly today. Turkey is witnessing the dissolution, witnessing the erosion in Iranian state, but Turkey is not really wants to participate, to me, any conflict against Iran. But I don't see any concerns about Iran. I don't see any any regrets about Iran from Turkey, actually.
I understand. Thank you very much, Ilkan. And actually, Mohammed, I have a question that is also a follow-up to this question. So, what was the Azerbaijani official position of regarding the toppling of Bashar al-Assad and Turkish help and Turkey helping this happening? And if you also, if you want, you can actually add maybe something to what Ilkan has already said. Maybe you have some other perspective or some other ideas. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Dalkuc detailed very thoroughly. So I would just add, as you brought up regional players, maybe I can just briefly touch upon what Russia is doing, yeah, because it's also essential player in the Syrian, let's say, battlefield. So yeah, after Assad's fall, now he's in Moscow, and Russia is modifying its presence in the region. And I do believe that engagement with Turkey is essential. And I know that Turkey now is the key mediator between Russians and new Syrian government. And as far as I see, there was official news that there will be meeting between the officials of Turkey and Russia in Damascus soon, I think in May. So that shows that both Russia and Turkey need stable Syria, which is vital for their interests. And in the case of Russia, they have military bases. They want to keep them there to project power in the wider Mediterranean and Africa. And for Turkey, it's clear the migrant issue, and also I think to summarize what's going on in Syria in the context of Turkey, I think it's kind of similar to Iran's strategy. We can call it forward defense strategy. Yeah, what was Iran's strategy was that to keep influence in Syria and the neighboring countries, so that any influence in Iran would be met outside of its borders. Now the same is with Turkey, I think. In the sense that Turkey is now battling, let's say, Kurdish, let's say, influence outside of its borders in Syria. Before, in the 2010s, it was, leaked to Turkish territory, both in the case of migrants and terror attacks and everything. And I think similar processes are underway in Iraq. They are pressuring there, and I think the Turkish influence will increase in Iraq again to the detriment of Iranian influence in terms of its axis of resistance forces there. So yeah, in that case, it's Turkey's forward defense strategy. And when it comes to Azerbaijan, I think the official response was that because Assad was seen on the side of Armenia, there was some anti-Azerbaijani and anti-Turkish comments during the Second Karabakh War. And Azerbaijan welcomed the change of power in Syria. And recently in Antalya Diplomacy Forum, President Aliyev met Mr. al-Shara. And now Azerbaijan is eyeing investments in Syrian economy, mostly energy related. And there are some rumors that the Syrian side hopes that it can kind of deter further Israeli attacks on Syrian infrastructure, because, as you know, the same rationale is underway with Turkey, that there is a Turkey T4 military base, there will be Turkish air defenses, so that al-Shara is is going a long way to attract foreign investment, yeah, whether it's Gulf investment. Saudi and UAE have been openly supportive of that, and Qatar is an essential player, yeah. So in that case, all this will create some kind of an environment, stable environment in Syrian territory that will make it completely difficult for Israel to destabilize. So that's the rationale, and I think Azerbaijan could be interested in mediating. So yeah, in that case, the change of power in Syria had both positives and negatives for Azerbaijan. Again, positive was Turkey's hand strengthened, because in the Middle East, Azerbaijan wants Israel and Turkey to be as powerful as possible, so that they are not busy with their domestic problems, but they can expand and project power to other regions, especially the South Caucasus. If you remember, after October 7 attacks, Israel was busy on every front, so they could not think about the South Caucasus. But now it is a different picture. I do believe the same process is going with Turkey. Now Turkey is a proactive player, not a defensive player in Syria, so that they can play in all different fronts. So in that case, that was the positive. And Azerbaijan is coordinated its moves with Turkey. And the negative one is Azerbaijan is between rock and a hard place in the case of possible Turkish-Israeli clash. So it is two key allies, I would say, and recently President Aliyev mediated. Yeah, in Baku there was the meeting between Turkish and Israeli security officials. That shows that Azerbaijan is going a long way to help on that, but unfortunately, it has not been fruitful as far as I know. So, but the efforts are underway, and after Trump's mediation, I think now there is kind of normalization. So the Turkey and Israeli side are now negotiating and talking to each other rather than bombing or using hard forces to solve their problems. So yeah, in that regard, it's mixed record. I think both success and quite big challenges for Azerbaijani diplomacy in Syria.
Okay, thank you. And actually, we will continue with you, Mahammad, because I have a question about the Turkish-Azerbaijani relations, and especially with regard to the second Nagorno-Karabakh war and what happens next. Because we know that currently Armenia is trying to, let's say, to arrange its relations both with Azerbaijan and with Turkey, with the hope of, let's say, normalizing and stabilizing the situation after the defeat in Nagorno-Karabakh war in 2020. So, could you please tell me the Azerbaijani approach towards Azerbaijani official position regarding Armenia's efforts on the improving relations, or let's say stabilizing the relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey, and also what is the if there is Azerbaijani Turkish approach towards this idea of Armenia becoming of the actually cessation of diplomatic hostilities and kind of a normalization in the region. So, please.
Yeah, during the Second Karabakh War, Turkey emerged as key power broker in the South Caucasus, I do believe, because it was thanks to its quite essential military support. I mean, I'm saying military support. Azerbaijan was procuring those weapons from Turkey, mostly Bayraktar drones and others. So that was kind of game changer in certain circumstances, taking into account that Armenia's air defense systems were kind of out of game in the early periods of the war. So yeah, and after the war again, Turkey was involved there in the monitoring mission, let's say, in Azerbaijan. So and coordinating with Russia. And right now the process, as you know, draft peace deal is agreed between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but there are some preconditions from Azerbaijani side that to ensure that the peace is sustainable. Again, Azerbaijan thinks that Armenia should make constitutional amendments. That is, again, long-term, because what if Pashinyan government is, let's say, collapsed? If there is a revanchist powers, Azerbaijani side believes that it can give Armenia excuse in the future to lay, again, claims against toward Azerbaijani territory. And the other one is OSCE Minsk Group. Azerbaijani argument is that, okay, if the Karabakh conflict is over, and if the OSCE Minsk Group was about Karabakh conflict, so why we still keep it? And the concern is that if, again, there is some kind of change of power balances in the South Caucasus and the wider region. Now we see Trump is normalizing with Putin. We don't know what will happen between Europe and Putin tomorrow. So that's the concern, because OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs are France, Russia, and the United States. So in the future, Azerbaijan is worried that this issue can again be brought back to the OSCE agenda. So Azerbaijan doesn't want to keep it. Again, the concern is long-term. The argument is that, yes, now we have a draft peace agreement, but that's not enough. And that's not enough for sustainable peace in the region. So yeah, in that regard, Azerbaijan is awaiting Armenia to make those changes. So, well, in the case of Armenia, Armenia saw that Russia is an unreliable ally, yeah, because on many occasions it did not come to Armenia's help in its war with Azerbaijan. And now Armenia is trying to economically and militarily diversify its dependence away from Russia. And economically, they are now adopted laws that eyes accession to the European Union. A very complicated process because Armenia is a member of the Eurasian Economic Union and CSTO, both Russia-led organizations. And militarily, they are diversifying to France and India mainly. And in the near future, Iran can involve also in this process because they are preparing to sign strategic partnership agreements soon. And in that case, if Armenia wants to go westward, how does it go? I mean, that's the question where Turkey comes in, because
That's the big question.
Because without normalizing Turkey, it's almost impossible, at least in terms of transport, because that would highly raise the let's say price of sending Armenian goods to the EU market. So yeah, in that regard, normalization with Azerbaijan and Turkey is key. So that's why Armenia is right now pushing all doors, let's say, to facilitate the process, so long as Russia is busy in Ukraine. Again, I think they are also themselves quite careful because the situation in Ukraine is kind of coming to conclusion. If Trump is increasing the pressure, at least there is such perception, even if small. And Turkey is, it's interesting that Turkey is rushing to, facilitate this opening of the borders with Armenia, because so long as Russia is weak, Turkey would like to bank on this, let's say, vacuum to expand its footprint in the South Caucasus. So in that regard, I think there could be some not disagreements, but concerns between Turkey and Azerbaijan, because Turkey wants to rush the process. Azerbaijan says, no, I'm not rushing because I have strict security concerns that Armenia should make, amendments to its posture. So in that regard, Turkey and Azerbaijan are not on the same page. But again, I do believe that Turkey cannot, let's say, put the normalization with Armenia over its, let's say, allied relations with Azerbaijan, because, as you know, immediately after the Second Karabakh War in 2021 July, Turkey and Azerbaijan signed the Shusha Declaration. That's the kind of alliance between the two countries. So yeah, I think now the process is going in the direction that Azerbaijan and Turkey are rushing Armenia, that yes, we understand your pro-Western pivot, but you have to pay some price for that. I mean, make some concessions, yeah.
I understand, obviously. And Ilkan, could you please present us the Turkish perspective on this issue?
Actually, Turkish government gets some serious pressure from the West in the last decades about its ideological stance, it is authoritarian tendencies, and so far and so forth. And the Armenian issue is Armenia is an opportunity for Turkey to be realign itself from with Western causes and Western institutions like NATO and basically European Union. The Armenian European collaboration is actually an opportunity for Turkey to reposition its own relationship with Europe actually, and Turkey is really wants to use the Armenian shift to Europe to its own agenda. I do believe, like Mohammed, and that there are some differences about the pace of this approach actually with Turkey and Azerbaijan. But I also do believe that Turkey, from Turkish perspective, Azerbaijan is always comes first. I mean, that's definitely a non-negotiable issue for Turkey and Azerbaijan. Actually, it will not ever change. But in the end, somehow, maybe now, maybe tomorrow, maybe in a couple of years, we will see, we may see some kind of a collaboration with Western institutions and the Southern Caucasus region. And Turkey is actually wants to gain some ground within Europe, actually, by these approach. I mean, when we get rid of these military conflicts in the Southern Caucasus region, this region is actually will be open to the European markets, and in all regards. I mean, from tourism to education to sports to economy, and we may see a very strong European economical approach to the Southern Caucasus region, so that Turkey will also benefit from that. I mean, for example, when the Southern Caucasus region countries are getting as a candidate status from European Union, Turkish position to the European Union also shifts. Turkey will become not as a border state to Europe. Turkey will be a connection between two European lands. Turkey will be to Turkey always a bridge from Asia to Europe, but after the Caucasus, after a shift to the Southern Caucasus region, Turkey will be a bridge between two parts of Europe. I mean, this will change the position of Turkey, and this may have significant effects. I mean, Europe is not did not really finance, for example, Turkish transportation infrastructure. But after these shifts in the Southern Caucasus region, European Union funds will be used as a financial back to Turkish infrastructure investments. Even like these minor issues are really important to me. But in the end, as Mohammed said before, Azerbaijan will always comes first to Turkey. That won't really change.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for this clarification. And actually, Mohammed, since you have mentioned Iran in just like 5 minutes ago, I'd like to come back to this country because this country remains still an interesting case in the region, an interesting actor, I would say, in the region, disrupting actor in the region with regard to, for example, the conflict in the Middle East. I mean, the Hamas-Israeli conflict, and even the conflict between Israel and Iran. There was last year there was an exchange of fire. I mean, the exchange of missiles and rockets and bombings between the two. So first, on the one hand, the Iranian influence has, I guess, has evolved in the Caucasus after the Nagorno-Karabakh war, and you have mentioned that Iran may jump in on supplying the arms to Armenia, for instance. But on the other hand, the general position of Iran is weakening, and the internal problems as well are becoming more important in Iran, and its military position that was proven quite weak, I would say, in the exchange of fire between Israel and Iran last year. So, how could you characterize the Iranian current, let's say, foreign policy in the region regarding Syria, regarding the Caucasus, Turkey, Israel, and the Gulf states? And how could you characterize Iranians' internal dynamics, if you may comment on this? It would be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very complicated picture because right now Iran is turning inward. I mean, as after I think August 2024, we saw that key figures in its acts of resistance, I mean, part of its foreign policy strategy in the Middle East and the wider region was paralyzed. The head of Hamas, Hezbollah, killed, and of course its main state ally, let's say Syria, the Bashar al-Assad regime toppled. So now Iran's major power projection abilities, capabilities in the Middle East is kind of paralyzed. I mean, this is, again, they are not out of the game, but highly, let's say, paralyzed. And its ballistic missile and drone capabilities also. We saw that in the two exchange of fires for the first time, I think, in their history. since the revolution. There was in April 2024 and October. We saw that they were not, I think, not that quite effective, but still. And the Israeli counterattacks again paralyzed some of its capabilities, especially air defense systems. Now, but if we return back to the 2020 war, the Second Karabakh War, of course, Iran was the main loser, if I may, because it was out of the table where the rules of the game were written. Yeah, it was mainly Russia and Turkey, and then the Western countries intervene in the process. I mean, in the mediation process. So yeah, there is this. Since that time, since 2020, Iran was quite happy about Russia's dominance, hegemony in the South Caucasus. There was a status quo, so that Iranian vital interest lied elsewhere, especially in the Persian Gulf. Yeah, it was highly focused on there, still there, Israel. But till that time, it was Russia's, let's say, managed instability. Russia was balancing Armenia and Azerbaijan against each other. Georgia was another story. But Russia, I think Iran was kind of comfortable with its northern borders. Second Karabakh War changed that picture. Now Iran has to focus and spend its resources to bolster its influence in that front too. That's loss of energy. Yeah, you have to fight compete on different fronts. And another development was the Western encroachment in the region. Again, there is now EU monitoring mission in Armenia. Yes, in the beginning, Iran was welcoming, but now last year there was this Armenia-United States strategic partnership agreement. There were some gossips that some troops could be involved in the border monitoring missions. So yeah, that's Iran is in kind of openly worried about possible Western expansion in the South Caucasus. And another concern was the Azerbaijan-Turkey Central Asia belt. They call it, Mr. Kemal Karazi, advisor of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, openly called it NATO's Turan corridor. Yeah. So Iran is seen as a threat to its regional position and national security, because Zangezur corridor would cut it, according to Iranian, let's say, interpretation, from Armenia and the European markets. So that's another let's say, blow to Iranian presence in the South Caucasus. Right now, with Azerbaijan, it's quite an interesting moment, because on the one hand, Iran and Azerbaijan agreed that, yes, we have diverging interests. Despite post-2023 October 7 events, Iran was pressuring Azerbaijan not to stop its oil supplies and military cooperation with Israel, but Azerbaijan did not. Yeah, instead it opened its embassy in Israel in April 2024, and I mean, on the other hand, Iran was deepening cooperation with Armenia. And right now, there are discussions that Azerbaijan could be included in Abraham Accords. I think that's more about the United States-Azerbaijan relations than Azerbaijan-Israel relations, because during the Biden administration, Azerbaijan-United States relations kind of damaged. Armenia and Iran are preparing to sign a strategic partnership agreement. That shows there will be, this solidification, crystallization of Armenia, Iran, and Israel, Azerbaijan, let's say, alliances. But on the other hand, Iran needs Azerbaijan for connectivity and reaching out to Russia, especially, again, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this international north-south transport corridor. So now we have Russian-Astara Railroad, and Russia committed financially that they will pay this $1.6 billion. And that will make Azerbaijan a key partner along the route. And there are now ongoing discussions. Iran can buy electricity from Azerbaijan because, as you know, there is electricity crisis and, in general, energy crisis in Iran, domestic politics, economy now. And also, I think on April 15th, there was this agreement between Iran and Russia that they will start this sending Russian gas to Iran. According to the January 2025 strategic partnership agreement between Russia and Iran, Russia is expected to send 55 billion cubic meters of gas to Iran through Azerbaijan. It's interesting. There is no such infrastructure existing. So Right now, the potential is 2 billion cubic meters. They can start from that, but 55, that means infrastructure expansion, and Russia should invest in this infrastructure. So here again, Azerbaijan is the key partner, and as Iran should have to keep the channels open with Azerbaijan to realize these potentials. Because again, in both energy and transport infrastructure, Armenia is not an attractive partner, despite all the political fanfare, again, because its geographical constraints are quite immense. So you need billions of dollars to put investment in Armenia. But with Azerbaijan, it's the best, I think, most attractive route. So yeah, in that instance, right now, Azerbaijan-Iran relations is again compartmentalized. On the one hand, there is this rivalry, but the red line should not be passed. But on the other hand, there is this partnership going on. And I will conclude by this one notable development was that during both exchange of direct attacks in 2024, in April and October, there was no reaction from Iran about Azerbaijan, because Iranians have always been worried about potential Azerbaijani involvement in Israeli strikes against Iran, because that's the closest partner to Iranian territory. There was any backlash, and there was any go down in the Iran-Azerbaijan relations. Instead, after both attacks, there was some joint military exercises and general visits to each other. So that showed that the two sides have established some kind of a political mechanism to coordinate their moves, even in that kind of high escalation periods, rather than increasing the pressure on each other. That was a quite interesting development.
Indeed, and I have a very quick follow-up question to you as well. Could we say, actually, given what you have just said, that Iran's attention or Iran's focus after the toppling of Bashar al-Assad in Syria has somehow shifted to the Caucasus, that they pay much more attention to the Caucasus than it was before?
Immediately after Assad's fall on December 8th, there was the Iranian media, some weeks after, Iranian media was awash with reports that now Turkey is trying to replicate its success in Syria in the South Caucasus. That was about Zangezur corridor. Because in the end, the Iranians did not protect militarily the Al-Bukamal border crossing point in Syria, that connects Syria with Iraq and was controlled, I think, mostly by Iranians and its proxies. But they just fled, and gave the control to SDF Kurds. And it was quite surprising for some regional observers. And so there was therefore some speculations that Turkey is quite emboldened by this move and can replicate this success in the South Caucasus. But I think after that, it did not play out as expected. And right now, today, Mr. Pezeshkian is coming to Baku. And the Azerbaijani president said on many occasions that, yes, there were some kind of misunderstandings before, especially in 2021 and 2022. Military exercise along each other's borders, some escalation ladder there was. But and then there was terrorist attack on Azerbaijani embassy in January 2023. But now Azerbaijani embassy restored its activity, and now there is I think, high degree of coordination between Azerbaijan and Iran. So in that instance, I think again, I think still Syria and the Middle East, let's say Gulf, Iran's higher strategic priority rather than the South Caucasus, because in the South Caucasus the issues in more or less are cleared. There is this peace process, and Azerbaijan is not as let's say, assertive with regard to Zangezur corridor as it was before, and it again openly agreed with Iran that there would not be any let's say escalation that would threaten the interests of the other regional players. So I think Iran and Azerbaijan are coordinating in that front. So and I don't think that Iran believes that they are out of Syria. Some of their officials openly said that, yes, we lost, but we are not out. And they are still trying to develop some links with Kurds, of course, as Israel is doing. And they are still trying to build some proxy forces there. That because al-Shara government is not consolidated, and we don't know what will happen in the near future. And I'm sure that still Syria and Iraq and other active resistance, let's say, countries are the priority rather than the South Caucasus.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Ilkan, and actually the same question to you about what are Iran's priorities right now in the region and what are the dynamics in Iran. But also, if you may, I'd like you to add a few comments as well on the Turkish-Iranian relations.
To me, I actually think that Iran's real problem is actually not a foreign problem. Iran's real problem is within its regime, actually, and we all witnessing some issues about Iran, but there are actually issues about the Iran's regime's inner struggles. We are seeing the reflections about them in the international arena, actually. And Iranian regime is not really getting hit from outside, but I guess he is getting hit from inside. To me, the Iran's real problems is inside, and Iran's his own difficulty about getting the consent of its own people within its regime's higher rankings. I mean, Iran is a real problem in that arena, and Iran is actually suffering this kind of a situation. Iran's suffering this kind of situation in Syria, in Iraq, in Caucasus. Actually, we are seeing the reflections of that kind of a situation. I mean, we are witnessing as an outsider observers. We are witnessing some international problems. Yes, they are. We are witnessing this kind of problems. Yes, there are some security concerns and foreign interests and all that. But for example, I don't see, for example, as Iranians rival Israel as an omnipotent like godly figure. I mean, Israel also has its own limits, but after the success of Israel's against Iran is actually relies on the Iran's inner weaknesses. We all witnessed that Israel's capabilities are also limited. But in the end, Iran has own problems, and Iran is actually struggling its own struggles. To me, other than that, actually, Mohammed's interpretations are pretty solid. We will see. We may see some approaches in general in the every part of the world. There are some needs to get some new kind of trade routes and political collaborations within Southern Caucasus to Europe to Asia, and Iran is in a strategic position in that regard. But we all know that the Iranian regimes are not capable with this kind of an international collaboration agenda. But we all know that after the COVID pandemic and after the trade wars, world needs some different and new trade routes and international collaborations. From India to China to Russia to Turkey to Europe to Israel to Saudi Arabia, there are lots of options, and we all know that we all need that. We all need those. And I'm afraid Iranian regimes within its own struggles are not really fully capable with all those kind of collaborations, to me. Other than that, I don't see any kind of an irredentist moves from Azerbaijan against Armenia. This is not really solid, and I don't see any way of containment against Iran will be applied with that region. Iran will always have its own borders, its own roads to connect to every part of its own strategic partners. Iran will not be contained. But in the end, in the end, Iran service some problems actually.
I understand. And actually, I'd like to wrap up this discussion with a more, let's say, open question, but at the same time, if you may answer it briefly, maybe in 2 minutes or something like this, I'd like you to point out the main problem in the region. So, what is the main problem, in your opinion, in the Middle East? And what is the key foreign power or a regional power that is playing, let's say, a destructive role, and what foreign or regional power plays a constructive role or very important role in making things better? So let's start with Mahammad, and then we will finish with Ilkan.
Again, very complicated question, but
complicated but simple, or simple but complicated
at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. Right now, I think the problem is that we are and the old system is dying and the new is not yet born. Yeah, that's the main key mantra.
The general problem.
Yeah, in the Middle East, we are trying to repair the wheel while the car is moving. Yeah, it's like United States withdrawing some kind. Yeah, that creates some vacuum. And we saw that there was some attempts on part of China. They mediated this significant Saudi-Iranian deal in 2023. And Russia is busy in Ukraine, so they are, I think, quite in reactive mode. Again, we saw it in Syria. They did not resist, and they just fled, kind of. And so, yeah, I think everybody are busy in their own regions, so that they do not project that kind of an influence. And I think let's say strategic autonomy of regional players are increasing. I would call it more regionalization of the Middle East, where no external single power can write the rules of the game. Again, be it the United States or China or Russia. I think Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, these countries are quite influential in shaping the picture of the region. Qatar, yeah, again, even in the case of Syria. But for now, there is no competition, as Mr. Dalkuc said, this Turkey, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates, Saudi blocks, as we saw in 2010s, this political Islam stuff. And both are right now investing in Syria's infrastructure, at least in openly they say it, and they are trying to leverage their relations with the United States to cancel these sanctions, because otherwise the Syrian government will not consolidate. So it's also in the interest of the Turkish side. Again, very briefly, I think right now there is no, I think, let's say, positive or negative involvement from those external powers. Again, it's both of them or neither, but it's mostly regional powers with strategic autonomy defining the at least current picture of the region. That's, I think, my short answer.
And I see you like the term coined by our president. I mean, not the term coined, but the term used a lot by our president Emmanuel Macron.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. And Ilkan, please, the floor is yours. The same question, briefly.
It's a difficult question, but we all witnessing the American withdrawal and the Russian withdrawal simultaneously from the Middle Eastern region and the greater Middle Eastern region. And Mohammed actually pointed out very correctly and very delicately that maybe the middle powers are actually rising, like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Azerbaijan, and they are becoming actors they are becoming actors in other arenas. They're not just their close borders, but other than that. For example, we are talking about Azerbaijani involvement within the with respect to Turkish and Israeli relationships. For example, we are witnessing about Saudis in many different arenas. For example, we are witnessing of United Arab Emirates in the horns of Africa. For example, we don't see something like that in 10 years ago. And these kind of these kind of middle powers are gaining ground, and they are gaining ground very swiftly and continuously, and we will see more of it in the upcoming years. Actually, the strong the middle powers with strong economies will actually gain ground in the upcoming years. That's a solid fact that we will be witnessing in the Middle Eastern, in the Caucasus regions. That's pretty simple, and that's pretty certain to me.
Okay, thank you very much for this extensive discussion and for your inputs and brilliant thoughts. And hope to see you in some near future to keep up our discussion on the regional affairs. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.